This is Conversation Z, a podcast presented by NWSOFA and hosted by me, Justy. At our table, we will hear from the generation who is taking the torch of liberty to new heights. An estimated 4 million Americans will turn 18 in the months leading up to the 2020 presidential election. Gen Z is the vote that can ignite the change so many of us are desperate for. And today, we will take a seat and listen to their stories, their experiences, and how they plan to shape the future of our democracy right here on Conversation Z.
This episode's featured musical guest is Big Mermaid.
Welcome back to Conversation Z. I am your host, Justy, and today I am joined by Hannah Hyman. Hannah is a trustee and board member of the Schaumburg Township District Library, a position that she was elected into 3 years ago when she was just a senior in high school. Now 21, Hannah is currently a senior at DePaul University in Chicago, studying political science and religious studies. Hannah is an advocate for her peers, and we are so honored to have her on today. Hannah, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, thanks, Justy, and thank you for that really nice introduction. I feel very special.
My pleasure. You are very special.
Thank
doing
you.
Tremendous things. I have a question for you. How are you holding up? I mean, this is such a rough year.
Yeah, I think it's really been a tough 4 years, if we're being completely honest. And then
sure has.
This year has just kind of compounded everything. But you learn as you go. We're doing this podcast over Zoom. I've been doing my classes over Zoom.
Zoom University here.
Exactly. Yes, I want that on my degree. DePaul, you are on notice. But you learn to adapt. And I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. Election day is coming up. It is the end of September, and so we're getting closer.
We are getting so
I can't wait.
Close, right? Me too. I've never been more excited to vote. This one is really important, and we are going to drive that home. And, you know, like you said, the election is coming up very quickly. It seems like just yesterday we had 10 candidates on the Democratic board, one of which I know is one of your biggest inspirations, Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely. Fun fact first, though, this is the first presidential general election that I will be old enough to vote in.
Wow.
Yes, I missed the cutoff for 2016 by 1 month.
I will tell you, I felt the very same way in 2008. I just missed President Obama's first election when I was 17, and I was heartbroken. But you know what? You may not have Liz Warren on this ticket, but we can be seen. We can have a leader who understands us much better than the president that we currently have.
Absolutely. And I think that Joe Biden has in many ways kind of picked up the policy torch from her. And, you know, I'll be honest, he wasn't my first choice, but I'm still going to support him to the end. I think he's a good person, and I'm happy that we have a solid nominee. And I really, you know, if we get everyone out to vote, I think we have a great chance of getting Trump out of office.
This episode of Conversation Z is brought to you by NWSOFA-Indivisible and HBX Productions.
So tell me a little bit about how you were inspired by her and what was that? What triggered that inspiration?
Yeah, so I have always been interested in politics. From a young age, I actually stole my parents' copies of Mother Jones that they would leave in the bathroom. So I was reading that at a young age. And I remember I was at a party when I was 14 years old, and there was a copy of Elizabeth Warren's book, A Fighting Chance, that had just come out.
It's a great book.
And yes, it's amazing. And it was sitting on my friend's coffee table. I think his mom had bought it, but I saw it. And I remember my dad mentioning that Elizabeth Warren was this senator that was fairly new and that he was pretty excited about. So I looked at the dust jacket and I just started reading it in the middle of hanging out with all my friends.
Wow.
And yeah, I told my friend, hey, like, I'm really sorry. Your mom is going to have to read this later. I'm going to borrow this.
I need to take this with me.
Yes. And I finished it in about 3 days. All I did was just read that book. And I was so inspired by what Senator Warren had to say, her story of overcoming all of the odds, you know, coming from a middle-class family like mine and going to law school and eventually becoming elected. I thought that was amazing. And I was so inspired by her story that the next day I went to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, we're going to sign up for a campaign. I don't care which one, but we're going to sign up for one. The very next day, we signed up to work for Pat Quinn's gubernatorial reelection campaign, and that was my first campaigning experience.
Isn't that something, how just sharing your story and your experiences can inspire others to live theirs to their fullest? And
Absolutely.
she has done that for so many people, and you are following right in her footsteps. Now, you mentioned the 2016 presidential election. You know, you were a little younger at the time, but you were very politically involved. What do you remember?
Honestly, it's kind of fused into my brain. It's like the world's saddest screenplay. But I remember I had taken the day off of school to be an election judge. I was working on that, and afterwards, I managed to convince my parents to drive me to election night parties so that I could spend time with the people that I had worked with on campaigns. So at the time, I had been working for Raja Krishnamurthy's campaign, and then I had also been doing a little bit on the side for a candidate in Downers Grove. So I wound up in Downers Grove that evening, and I was with my dad because he's my political co-pilot
Your
in
buddy.
all of this. Yes. When I ran for office, my mom was like, you know what? I'm going to make scones. I will feed the volunteers, but I'm going to hang home, honey.
Thank the universe for moms.
I know. They were the best scones ever.
I believe it. I believe it. I'm going to ask her to send me some, maybe. That sounds fabulous.
I can hook you up. We can do this.
Great.
Yes. But I was there with my dad, and we saw the returns coming in. And there was just this feeling of, well, this can't be real. It's still early. You know, okay, Trump is up now, but sometimes the early states go to Republicans. You know, this is how it goes. You need to wait sometimes. And we stayed a little bit longer at the party, and the mood just it crashed. And finally, around 10 o'clock that evening, my dad looked at me and he said, you know what, we're going to go home. This is going to be a tough one to ride out, so let's go home. You can go to sleep if you need to. I had been up since 4 that morning, so I really needed it. And we listened to the results come in on the radio on the drive home. I couldn't believe them, so I went to bed. I know that may not be the most civically engaged choice, but
you did what you had to do to protect your energy. Yeah,
exactly. I was like, you know what? I'm going to wake up. I'm going to find out that Hillary Clinton won. Everything is going to be okay. And I went to bed. My brother woke me up. He was going to go to school. I had worked it out with my teachers and my parents that I was going to go in a little bit later that day. And my brother said, hey, Hannah, Trump won. And I thought he was joking. I thought he was just being a jerk. So I rolled over, went back to sleep. I checked my phone about an hour earlier. I don't know about you, but I'm a news junkie. I'm signed up to like 4 different online news emails. So I checked them. I saw that Trump had won. I thought it was a horrible, horrible dream. I went back to sleep, and eventually my mom came to get me, and she said, you know, you have to go to school today. And so I got up and I went to school, but it was so strange. It was like this hazy feeling of, I cannot believe that this happened. I cannot believe that this was real. And I was too young, I think, to really understand what happened when Bush lost the popular vote, but won the Electoral College, and the decision went to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't understand the ramifications the first time that happened, but the ramifications hit me like a ton of bricks that next morning. And I remember going to school, and it was somber. It was like an entire funeral had just hit the school. A lot of my friends were crying, especially my queer friends who had just started to transition, or my friends who identified as part of the LGBTQ plus community. You know, not even just having Trump in office, but the reality of Mike Pence as vice president. And I think that what really got the tears going, this election was very much a referendum on civility and decency and love, as cheesy as that may sound. And for us to have lost was heartbreaking. And I lost it at that point, you know, seeing my teacher from 2 years previously just cry on her off period like that it was horrible. And I told myself at that point that I never wanted to see my friends have to experience that again. I never wanted my teachers to have to experience that again. But it really lit a fire under me to get even more involved than I already was, because I never want to see that happen again.
You talk about your first thoughts were, I don't want these people that I care about and people that I share a home with, that being what drove you to sadness. And I think that for a lot of us, that is what it was. Even for me as a person of color, a queer person, you know, I was thinking so much about almost everyone in my life. I mean, it's a very small demographic that is supported by this administration.
It is, and it is infinitesimally smaller. We have seen it shrink and shrink to the point where it seems like nobody's lives are sacred in the eyes of the administration. I mean, I really don't know what to say beyond that.
Right.
It's a horrible thing.
This episode's featured musical guest is Big Mermaid.
Don't look at me, please. Don't look at me, please.
If there is one person who has been an advocate for us and for our country for decades, it is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we just lost this past weekend. And I know that was a very heavy hit for a lot of us. So could you, I'm going to give you the floor here, kind of just tell us, how did that, either her legacy, you know, or the loss of RBG, how does that make you feel? How does that affect you and your work?
I filled out a candidate survey when I was running for office, and one of the questions that they asked me was, you know, who's your hero? And I put Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her and Elizabeth Warren are my pantheon of political women. And the thing about RBG that always inspired me was it wasn't just a short period of time in her life that she has been fighting for everybody. It's been a career-long trajectory, you know, arguing in front of the Supreme Court, becoming a tenured professor at Columbia. She dedicated her life and especially the last years of her life to fighting for us. I mean, for an 87-year-old woman to bear the weight of the country on her tiny shoulders in her last years and to hold on as long as she could, you know, to be a stopgap to help protect the sanctity of the Supreme Court, it's overwhelming. And losing RBG was very painful for a lot of us. I know that, you know, I stayed in my room for a couple hours by myself. I needed time to process. But I think that if there's one thing that we can take moving forward from her legacy and what she leaves behind, is something that my roommate very succinctly said. She said that there are no words, there is only action. And I I think that resonates. We can sit and we can think and try to quantify into words how much Ruth Bader Ginsburg means and meant and will continue to mean moving forward. But we can also take that and put it into action, because the fate of our Supreme Court is up in the air. I mean, with this election, it will determine Roe v. Wade. It will determine freedoms in our country for generations moving forward. And we need to act. This is not a time to be caught off guard by grief or paralyzed. Take time to grieve, but also we have to move forward. It's what she would have wanted. It is what she wanted. It was her final request to fight for the Supreme Court.
Speaking on her final request, for those who may not know, RBG's final request was we not replace her seat until a new president is installed. Now, I am not confident that the Trump administration will handle it that way. However, what I am confident in is that we will turn out to these polls. That is how we, as an American people, respect RBG's wishes, is turning out to the polls and electing a new president. This episode of Conversation Z is dedicated to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Should have said something. I should have said something.
So, Hannah, I now want to talk about your campaigns. I mean, this is so exciting. You have, I know, have worked on campaigns, including former Governor Pat Quinn. I just want to know a little bit about your experiences working on campaigns and how that translated into you running a successful campaign yourself.
I have done a lot of different duties on campaigns, everything from making phone calls to I'm about to start text banking for Joe Biden. I've knocked on doors. I've done data entry. I have helped run fundraisers. I even had the honor, and this was like my crowning achievement at that point. I got to introduce Raja Krishnamurthy when he had officially won the nomination for our Democratic representative when he ran.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love Raja.
That's a huge honor.
It was amazing. It's been years and I'm still floating in the clouds over it. So I've done a lot on different campaigns. And if there's one thing that has stood out to me, it's that you need to energize your volunteers. And you need a lot of volunteers.
Yes.
It's, ground game is really important. And I think that that's going to be complicated by COVID this year, but we'll find ways around it. We'll adapt. That's what we've always done. But going into my campaign, one of the biggest things was getting people to recognize that I was running and generating excitement over that. And I had a small team of volunteers. It was actually a lot of my friends and I, but we got literature printed, we had signs, we had stickers, I had my stuff up all over the high school. And because we didn't have, a huge budget, because we didn't have a huge campaign size, we really tried to tap into that energy, especially post-Trump, that fire to elect somebody. I hope that people think that I'm fighting for them. I absolutely am. But that drive to elect somebody who really will follow through and will try to make conditions better for everybody.
Absolutely. First of all, I mean, having your friends and family, that is the best kind of support that you can have. So shout out to them.
Yes, my dad was my campaign manager, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without my family and without my friends.
I think it's important to reiterate that, you don't have to have a huge network of people and volunteers that you don't know to run a campaign or to consider running. You have people right around you that will be more than willing to let you sit on their shoulders. So I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm sure what you've experienced in your term is that you grow support, that support grows, and you end up having this network, all stemming from that support of your friends and your family.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're someone who is interested in running for office, but you feel that you can't do it because maybe you don't know the right people, or you're going to struggle to recruit volunteers, just do it anyways. I know that it's easier said than done, but support will come as you move along. And, it was a small team of us that were out knocking doors every weekend, and we still managed to do it. And I think that if you keep trying, and if you really put your heart and soul into it, that it can be done. And so anybody listening who feels that they can't run just because they're not connected, they don't know the right people, they've never done it before, don't let that stop you.
This episode of Conversation Z is brought to you by NWSOFA-Indivisible and HBX Productions.
This was your first campaign, and it was, like I said, a successful campaign. You were elected in as trustee of the Schaumburg Library. So since assuming your office, what are some things you've seen change, or change you have been a part of, or efforts that you're proud of? Tell us how it's been being in office.
Yeah, please forgive me, Justy. I'm going to soapbox for a minute.
Let's
because
do it.
I think that there have been a lot of initiatives at STDL that I am so proud of and so excited about. The biggest one being that we are officially a fine-free library. So what that means now is that patrons can go and borrow their books, as they would, or their media materials as they normally would. And if it's overdue, we actually renew the item for them a certain amount of time so that they don't get penalized, and they're kind of reminded, hey, please bring your stuff back.
Sure.
When it's overdue, when they run out of renewals, we still don't find them. We recognize that it can be really hard to get materials back to the library sometimes, just with the stress of everyday life. And if you forget to bring a book back, or you wanted to reread a book for the 5th time because you really enjoyed it and you ran out of time in that window, you shouldn't have your card frozen for it. So this initiative, I am so excited about, because
That's
it means,
wonderful.
yes, it means that busy people can use our resources without having to worry so much. And it means that people who are lower income within our community won't need to figure out, am I going to pay for this bill, or, oh, I need to go unlock my library card, I got to get over to the library. I'm hoping it takes a lot of stress off of our patrons, especially in the time of COVID.
I will say, too, really quickly, I want to stress the importance of libraries in our communities, especially during a pandemic. We have students who are now doing all e-learning and do not have access to materials, or maybe their families can't afford Wi-Fi. And there are resources that libraries offer, and not just to students, just to their community, that make it accessible to learn. Libraries are crucial because they're adapting and they're integrating technology. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yes, that is so true. And if anyone listening right now is a student, or is the parent of a student who is struggling with e-learning, Schaumburg Library has your back. We've got you. Not only are we going fine-free, but we have also actually extended out our Wi-Fi to the parking lot. So if you are unable to get Wi-Fi in your own home, you can just come, you can set up in our parking lot, and we have that available to you for free. As always, our library cards are free. If you are in the boundaries of District 54 and District 211, but are in the small sector of people who are outside of the Schaumburg Library boundaries, you can now get a library card for free. We just put in place a new program, and it was designed to help students who need access to our resources. So if you are in D211 or D54 and you haven't signed up for a library card, you can do that now. We also have an online application that makes it easier. So if you are immunocompromised, you do not need to come into our library to get your library card. You just need to fill out a form online. And we've been working on expanding our e-learning materials. We have free ACT and SAT prep for students. I wish that I would have utilized this more. Practice tests and prep can be very expensive, but you can get help online with the Schaumburg Library for free. We have tutoring available. We also have, if you're bored and need a little extra learning or extra stimulation, we have programs to learn languages online. Mango, you can learn a wide variety of languages on. And we also have research archives. I mean, that's the bread and butter of every library. On top of that, I told you I was going to soapbox.
I'm loving it. I'm like, wow, Schaumburg Library has the hookup.
We do. If you don't have Netflix, but you really want to stream something, we have a variety of services that are just designed for you to get episodes of your favorite TV shows. Hoopla is one of the newest ones that we put in place. So come borrow a movie from us. Come borrow a CD or a DVD. And my favorite service that we have is called Creative Bug. So if you are a parent and if you have young children and you're struggling to occupy their time or to kind of add more to their educational experience this year, you can go and you can learn how to do crafts online. And there's all sorts of videos for different things that you can learn. And so now you can do crafts at home with your kid.
That is fun. Hannah has let us know that Schaumburg Library has everything from free Wi-Fi, learning languages, and there's so many wonderful resources that they are offering that are COVID-free. So please visit Schaumburg Township District Library online, and you can get that information there. Now, you know, Hannah, on Conversation Z, we keep it real. So I'm going to ask you a real question, because it's great when you're able to get things accomplished and fight for the things that you want to change. But as you know, we encounter difficulties all the time, probably more so than we encounter the opposite. So I'm going to ask you, what are some of the difficulties that you've maybe faced being in public office?
You know what, I feel that I'm very lucky being in a local office. I'm not in public so much as, say, like a senator. But, you know, things still come up. When I was running, I got a lot of questions about my age. I will say, though, that I had significantly more people excited about my campaign because of my age than people who, you know, were not on board and were naysayers. But I did have a few people tell me point blank to my face, I would not have voted for you if I knew how young you were.
Wow.
And that's, yeah, you just kind of keep it in stride. And I tried to remember that there were more people that were excited that I was 18.
Yep.
You know, as always, being in public office adds another thing to your plate. Time management can be really, really tough. And it can be very stressful, especially in budgeting. I'm a full-time student. I work 2 part-time jobs. I am working on grad school applications, and I also have my role in Schaumburg Library. So I will oftentimes live in the city and take a train home, come to my library board meeting, take a train back to the city at 5 a.m, you know, lay down for another 2 hours, and then wake up and go to classes the next day. So the time commitment can be hard, but it is so satisfying and so worth it. Every time that I was grouchy, that I was on the train at 6 a.m, because dear God, why would anyone be on the L at 6 a.m?
Correct.
But yeah, I've got stories, Justy.
I believe it. That
yes.
is a lot. And you have to find the thing that creates a fire within you. Something that you are so determined to change that you are willing to put your all into it. When we get that stressed, especially in this day that we're living in, self-care is very important. And it's something that we don't hear discussed often enough, especially with demographics that are oppressed. It's like we're not supposed to worry about our mental health, but that is such a huge factor into how we're able to live our day-to-day lives and give to our country. So being a political science student and in public office comes with stress. So what does self-care mean to you, and how does Hannah unwind?
Absolutely. The primary line of defense has got to be reminding myself that for as much stress as there is good that is put into the world, on account of the efforts of me and the rest of the board and everybody else working in politics. That giant list that I gave you of all of our resources. Whenever I'm like, why am I doing this again? Why am I doing this to myself? I remember that huge, amazing list of things that the Schaumburg Library is able to offer people. I am also a huge crafter, in case you could not sense my enthusiasm when talking about Creative Bug.
Correct. Yeah, I want to know. So what are you crafting? What's your thing? What have you gotten into?
Yes.
I know that quarantine has got us all in discovering new hobbies and ways that we like to express our creativity.
Baking bread was really big in the beginning of quarantine, and
Yum.
my mom made like a braided challah for the first time from scratch. That was amazing.
Challah is delicious.
It is, yes. Happy New Year, by the way.
Yes,
it is the tail end of Rosh Hashanah.
Shana Tova.
Yes, if anybody listening celebrates that, Happy New Year. But I've done almost every craft under the sun. When I was little, I loved to bead. I did cross stitch for a while, but my addiction right now is knitting. I have made 3 sweaters during quarantine alone.
That's incredible.
It's a little ridiculous. I am not kidding. I've poked holes in my fingers from my needles. Totally
You're into
worth
something.
It, though.
You're into it,
It's, yes, I'm too deep. I can't get out.
That's incredible.
But yeah, so knitting is huge. I want to learn how to crochet, but the ability to create something beautiful with your time and your effort and your patience is so fulfilling. It's incredibly fulfilling. If anybody is listening and wants to do a knitting circle, hit me up. We can do this. Yes.
Hannah is probably an excellent coach. I mean, she's 3 sweaters in. That's 3 more sweaters than I've ever made.
Yeah, but I didn't tell you what those sweaters looked like.
That's all right. We're working on it, all right?
Yeah. So that's a huge part of my self-care routine, is taking the space to create something beautiful.
Taking care of our bodies and our minds. I know that therapy is a very important tool and resource that we do not all have access to.
Oh, yeah.
And COVID has taken away a lot of our jobs. We have a record high of unemployment in this country. We're surpassing that of the Great Depression. It's very real. And with the loss of employment comes loss of coverage, loss of benefits. So I'm going to let you talk about this and how it's affected you or your peers or other Gen Z people in your life. But I know that a lot of folks are suffering currently from loss of healthcare and how we handle healthcare right now. And that's another huge aspect of this election.
I want to start by saying that there is no shame in going to counseling, whether you go one time just to get everything off of your chest or whether it is a sustained appointment that you have. I firmly believe that everybody should see a counselor at least once in their life.
I agree with you.
If you have the ability to do so, I would highly recommend it. There is no shame in it. And if you don't have healthcare coverage, I know that My university, DePaul, offers low-cost counseling for people. I think that that's pretty much the norm at every university. So if you are a student and if you don't have insurance, or if you do have insurance and it's not amazing, your university should be able to hook you up. And there's also a lot of practices that have moved to sliding scale payment. So that is also an option. You can get therapy for $10 a session. And if you need that safe space to take care of yourself and to process how you're feeling, absolutely take care of yourself that way. Pivoting more to COVID and health insurance, I think that with COVID, we're kind of seeing the gap in healthcare and insurance really beginning to rear its head in the United States. People are seeing just how precarious their insurance situation is, how expensive that it can be to get healthcare if you don't have that insurance, or even with insurance, how expensive it can be to get care at a hospital. And on top of that, the gaps that we see in terms of healthcare throughout different communities. COVID has hit Black and Brown communities the hardest. There is no beating around the bush on that one. And we can see the ways in which Black and Brown communities have been neglected for a long time, and how we need to begin to put in place policies that ensure not only that everybody can have access to affordable and, frankly, good, comprehensive insurance, but also we see the value of community health initiatives and how much investing in communities and drawing attention and awareness to health gaps can save lives.
I have very little to add to that because that was very well said. But even if you're not a student at a university, a lot of times these universities will continue to offer sliding scale student counseling to you. So I will make sure that Conversation Z has a post on our Instagram with some resources to some affordable local healthcare. But thank you, Hannah, for speaking on that, because it is very important. And this pandemic has hit Black and Brown communities very hard.
This episode of Conversation Z is brought to you by NWSOFA-Indivisible and HBX Productions.
I have immunocompromised family members, and so just even on a day-to-day, the pandemic is present. And all I can say to that is, please, people, please wear a mask. There are some really cute ones on Etsy if you're not loving that surgical mask. Wear a mask. Take care of yourselves. Socially distance. The more that we do to stay safe going into winter, hopefully we can minimize the impact that people face.
We need to continue to take these measures. We're at a place where we as a country have just accepted, now we have to learn how to live with COVID-19 instead of doing everything that we need to do to eradicate it. And that is something I think we need to shift our mentality a bit to still try to beat this virus. So thank you for saying that. This election, like you said, is 39 days away, and we are in our home stretch. What is your voting plan, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us? That is our big thing, is to encourage those folks to get out and to make their voting plans now, because we are in it. As of yesterday, vote by mail ballots were sent out and early voting has begun. So what is your plan, Hannah?
So I opted for a mail-in ballot. However, I know that a lot of people are feeling a little bit hesitant about mail-in ballots. So I want to remind you that even if you have a mail-in ballot, you can bring it to your voting precinct and they can take it from you and then bring it to the county. So you don't need to get it into the mail 8 days before the actual election date if you need some more time to sit with it. So I did opt for mail-in. However, I am planning to election judge. You will see me there with my mask, face shield, gloves, like sanitary wipes. And I am planning on bringing my ballot to the precinct that I will be working in, just to be careful and ensure that it gets in. I would encourage everybody who is planning on voting, and if you're not planning on voting, please change your mind. Please vote. But everybody who is eligible to vote, I would encourage you to dig deep and to look into the plans of every candidate on that ballot. And I know that it can be tough when you're looking at, the huge slate of judges that are on there, but I promise you, it is worth it. If you want to see immediate, tangible change, something that you can see play out in your everyday life, start local and do your research there.
That's really important. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing your voting plan with us. You're doing such important work, and I just want to thank you for being on our show today. It has been so great talking to you.
It has been. Thank you so much for inviting me and for giving me a platform to, talk about things that I'm passionate about. Also, low-key, being on a podcast has been a dream since my childhood. I had an MP3 player. I would record myself doing a fake radio show. It was usually about like the Mario Brothers and video games. But this,
classic.
Yes, I am not kidding. This is a dream come true. So I am so excited.
The honor is all ours, and you are a star. And I have one more question for you.
Yes.
When you envision the future, what do you see, and what do you feel your role is in that?
That is a tough question.
Isn't it? I'm good.
It really is, yes. But, it is important. So I mentioned earlier that I am doing grad school applications. In my immediate future, my 5-year plan that you always talk about in the interviews, I'm hoping to get my PhD in political science. I focus specifically on political theory, so all that good stuff like what is justice, how do we structure a government, is tolerance the language we should be using
the groundwork.
or not? Yes. So I'm hoping to become a professor, and when I see my role in the future, I kind of see it in two parts. I see myself first as an educator. If I can get young people to care about the readings that I'm assigning and get them to see how they connect to their everyday life and to get them excited and passionate, that's the dream.
You've done
that's
your
the
job.
Goal.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I hope. And then the second part is I do see myself continuing to work in politics, whether it be volunteering or running for office. So I see myself in the educational part, and I see myself on the ground. I don't know if I'm going to run again in the future, and if I do, what I will run for. It really all depends on the situation, the time and place, and where I land, but I know that I will be involved in fighting for candidates, for progressive candidates moving forward.
I am tremendously excited for you. I know that you have a wonderful future ahead of you, and you're doing great things locally, and I hope that reach just expands and expands. And I think that you are an inspiration to not just folks your age, but to all of us. So thank you again for joining us. I am going to be keeping my eye on you because, very exciting stuff. I want to remind everyone, Hannah Hyman, who is our guest today, is a trustee and board member at Schaumburg Township District Library, which is offering wonderful resources currently. So you can visit them online, and please follow Conversation Z. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just search Conversation Z Podcast. So thank you again, Hannah. I want to give a shout out to this episode's musical guest, Big Mermaid. Their new EP drops this year. And a big thank you to our outreach director, Kim Garnett, artist Jada Roberts, graphic designer Ryan Hawkins, contributor Kirsty Garnett, and the entire Conversation Z team. You have been listening to Conversation Z.
Don't tell me what to do. I don't belong to you. Don't tell me what to do.